Okay, so I know that Wizards of the Coast doesn't exactly have the best track record as of late, and trust me, I know, boo, D&D, bad, stinky, we don't like them, and all that good stuff. But some of the stuff that they've been releasing regarding this new 2024 edition of D&D is actually kind of exciting and looks pretty cool. Like, so far, we've learned that this new 2024 version of D&D will give martial classes the ability to get a feature called Weapon Mastery, which unlocks hidden properties of weapons, 75 feats in the player's handbook alone. Inspiration got switched up so you can use it to reroll just about any check or damage roll now, and the PHB evidently has an entire section dedicated to creating unique characters, optimal build paths, and even has monsters that pertain to classes that can shapeshift or summon familiars. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because they've also taken some of the most popular house rules for D&D, like being able to use inspiration to reroll a check or save as opposed to the official rule, which prevented you from doing this, and using a potion only costs a bonus action as opposed to a full action, and made them official rules. Finally! And they even announced some huge changes to mechanics like Surprise, for example, because before it used to be where a surprise creature lost their whole first round of combat, which could really trivialize some combat encounters, but they changed that to now where a surprise creature only has disadvantage on their initiative roll, which is huge, which in my opinion drastically fixes this mechanic and plays pretty well into some of the new mechanics and features that WotC have announced for this new version of D&D, which I'm about to share with you. Like, going back to the weapon mastery thing, this is a really awesome new mechanic, or at least a new mechanic for D&D, that truly makes each weapon feel unique. Because these weapon masteries are essentially weapon traits that give weapons special properties, like Graze, which lets you deal some damage even if you miss, or Vex, which lets you roll your next attack with advantage, which seems pretty dang good for rogues and their sneak attack. And D&D is going to be releasing new videos, I think every day over this next week or so, talking about each new class and book and so forth, teasing new content, all that kind of stuff, but most recently they released a video talking about the fighter, which is what I want to talk about here and showcase some of the highlights. So for starters, weapons only have one of those weapon mastery traits like I mentioned earlier, so you can't like stack them on top of each other and create like a super weapon that has all of the traits, or at least not with the official rules. And something else that's really cool that they changed about the fighter is that you're no longer stuck to that fighting style that you chose way back at level 1, because you can change your fighting style now every single level. But moving on to some more specific features, at level 9, fighters get Tactical Master, which allows them to switch their weapon's mastery property during combat to a push, sap, or slow property, which normally you can't do because those weapon properties are generally exclusive to particular weapons. But while this small change may not seem like a lot, this actually adds a lot more depth and creativity options for the fighter class, or at least the base fighter class that wasn't there before. But next up we have Tactical Mind, which is a feature that enhances Second Wind, letting fighters use a charge of Second Wind to roll some extra dice to a failed roll to hopefully turn that failure into a success, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, is huge. Plus, as they level up, fighters can use Second Wind more frequently than they used to in 2014 5e. But then moving on and kind of keeping with the tactical naming theme here, at level 5, fighters gain Tactical Shift, which means that when a fighter uses Second Wind, they can move up to half their speed without provoking opportunity attacks, which means that fighters can now reposition a lot more during combat. And one thing that you're perhaps noticing about all these changes to the fighter class is that they've really made Second Wind a core feature of this class, as opposed to before, where the most core features, or perhaps the most sought after or desired features of the fighter class, were the extra attack and action surge. But moving on, at level 13, fighters get Studied Attacks, which basically means if a fighter misses their attack, they get advantage on their next roll against the same target, which is a way to showcase your character's adaptability and precision as a trained warrior. And then finally, at level 19, fighters can decide if they want an epic boon instead of an ability score improvement or an additional feat. And these epic boons are essentially like regular feats, but on steroids, because they not only include an ability score boost, but also some additional features. And these epic boons can even raise your ability score beyond 20, which used to be the maximum for your ability score. But now moving on to fighter subclasses, the Battle Master subclass stayed largely the same. They brought over a lot of stuff from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and moved into the PHB, and they changed Student of War so you can get another skill proficiency on top of your tool proficiency that you'd normally get. But besides that, the only real notable change they made to the subclass, or at least out of all the changes that they mentioned in the video, was to the Know Your Enemy feature. So now with the Know Your Enemy feature, all it takes is for you to consume one charge of this feature to learn your enemy's resistances, immunities, and vulnerabilities, which is pretty cool. And I think this makes sense because obviously a Master of Battle should be able to look at their enemy and ascertain their weaknesses, or perhaps things that wouldn't work very well against them. However, I just hope that this feature doesn't overshadow other class abilities, like perhaps a monk being able to punch a creature and learn its weaknesses, or perhaps a druid or a ranger being able to suss out what a creature's vulnerabilities are by looking at it and trying to recall information and stuff like that. But I guess we won't know until the books are officially released. But moving on to the Champion Fighter subclass, all of you Champion fans out there will love these new enhancements, such as better remarkable athlete abilities, advantage on initiative rolls, and heroic warrior, which if you take this subclass, it means that it grants you heroic inspiration every turn in combat if you don't already have it. Which is kind of huge, because with the new inspiration rules, it means that you can reroll a check, save, or damage roll at least once every single turn. And additionally, at level 18, champions get Survivor, which does all the same things it used to, but now also gives the player advantage on death saving throws, and it gives your death saving throws that same expanded crit range that you normally have for your attacks, which essentially means that it will be very difficult to kill you if you take the champion subclass and make it to level 18. But moving on to probably my favorite fighter subclass, the Eldritch Knight can now use an arcane focus and has no School of Magic restrictions, which offers you more freedom in spell selection. And they also redesigned war magic features to better integrate spellcasting with attacks, making this subclass the true hybrid warrior mage that players have always wanted it to be. And if you don't understand why they changed the war magic is huge, then I'll let Jeremy kind of explain it real quickly.
You can now, with war magic, take the attack action and replace one of your attacks with casting a cantrip. And then improved war magic, which also now does not rely on a bonus action, now lets you, when you take the attack action, replace 2 of your attacks to cast a level 1 or level 2 spell.
This is massive because now it means that Eldritch Knights can use their extra attacks and action surges to weave spells in between their attacks that previously was completely unavailable. And obviously the video that D&D just released talking about all the new fighter subclasses and features and things like that doesn't include everything that the class has, because at the very end of the video they mentioned the Psy Warrior and then proceed to mention nothing about any of its features or mechanics or whatever. So it looks like we'll just have to wait for the books to come out until we can really get into all the juicy details regarding the fighter. But now let's actually talk about these changes, and be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments down below in regards to these changes, not only to the game system but also to the fighter class. But for me at least, overall, I love these changes. And while I do think that some of the changes that they made to the fighter class as well as some of the weapons and stuff like that are suspiciously similar to some very popular homebrew rules and other game system rules regarding those things, I just overall think that this is a win for D&D, because previously the fighter class was kind of seen as the most generic or basic class in the game system, besides the ranger, I guess. But overall, I think that all of these changes that they made to the fighter subclasses and the game system overall, such as like surprise and weapon mastery, and especially the Eldritch Knight subclass, are fantastic. Because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I would play an Eldritch Knight, or I would have a player play an Eldritch Knight or whatever, I always found myself either homebrewing some changes to the class or implementing some third-party material to make the class have a little bit more eldritchness, if that makes sense. So for me, I was really happy with the changes that they made to that class being able to cast more spells in between their attacks or with their attacks and things like that. However, one thing that I'm still worried about with this new version of D&D that I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot about in the coming days and weeks is monsters. Specifically, how monsters hold up against these new player classes, and if monsters get any new actions or features or things like that. Because as shown in D&D's most recent video and their playtest material and teases and all that stuff, the fighter class has gotten a massive buff. And if all of the other classes have similar changes, then I just hope that the monsters get a similar change as well and are not severely undertuned or overtuned. Because one of the things that many players and dungeon masters specifically hated about D&D was all of the extra time and effort that they had to put into balancing combat encounters by buffing a monster's HP pool or damage rolls or whatever. And don't even get me started on challenge ratings, because with the old version of D&D 5e, I felt like challenge ratings at certain times were just completely useless in determining how a combat encounter would go. So if anything, I just hope that the monsters are well made, and at the very least there is a section in the Dungeon Master's Guide or one of the books that teaches the game master how to properly balance and prepare combat encounters. And speaking of the new books, I went to go check out their pricing, bundles, and perhaps a pre-order special or whatever. And what's cool is that you get a physical and digital version of the book when you purchase them. But besides that, you don't get anything else for pre-ordering. You don't get a special D&D mini, a poster, or a special edition cover, or a cool Dungeon Master screen exclusive to the launch of the 2024 books, or anything like that if you pre-order. So what's the point in pre-ordering these books, especially if we don't know what the rest of the content will be and if it's any good? So if I were you, I would hold off on purchasing these books at least until they're officially released, because honestly, as of now, there is no incentive to pre-order them, and you're just kind of blindly buying these products without knowing any of their content and if they're actually good or not. But regardless, those are some of the biggest highlights for these new features, rules, and other mechanics that D&D is going to be bringing with it with this new version that's coming out later this year. And if you enjoyed, let me know by leaving a like and a comment down below, and perhaps I'll make more content covering some of the new D&D changes, because whether we like it or not, this new version of D&D is going to be sending waves throughout the whole community, and I'm here for the ride. But I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy. Bye-bye.